So Tucker's documentary on this shooter, Thomas Crooks, was must-see TV. It's only 34 minutes. People can watch it very quickly. He dropped it Thursday. I encourage everybody to go and watch it. And what happened was somebody, according to Tucker, leaked him some leads on this shooter that had never before been unearthed. And we don't know whether they'd been unearthed even by the FBI. And that's a big question. Does the FBI have this stuff and just didn't tell us? Or did the FBI not have any of it? Tucker has outlined this guy's social media use, which was deeply disturbing, and pointed to this guy being very right-wing up until January 2020. He was defending Trump. He was very pro-Trump. He also, this is not the right-wing part, happened to be racist, it sounded. He was making some, very racially charged posts. And then in January of 2020, it was like a 180. And he started to sound much more like a far-left progressive activist. And it escalated more and more and more over time. And I'm going to read you some of these, okay? So it started with him with posts such as, okay. This is July 2019 in response to an MSNBC video. Science wins. You can't not only, this doesn't make sense, but it says, not only was he born here, he also belongs here. Ilhan Omar and others are invaders, he wrote, and should honestly be killed and their dead bodies sent back. And then Tucker highlights a series of increasingly violent rhetoric used in these texts. July 20th, 2019, said Donald Trump was the literal definition of patriotism. 7 hours later, says, I hope a quick, painful death to all the deplorable immigrants and anti-Trump congresswomen who don't deserve anything this country has given them. That evening, a separate post, every one of the Trump-hating Democrats deserve to have their heads chopped off, put on stakes for the world to see what happens when you fuck with America. These continued for months and became increasingly violent in tone. There was one about the squad saying, this will be blatantly racist, but I hope Trump has these people murdered. I think Tucker's showing us not only that he used to be pro-Trump, as he explicitly said, but very, very violent rhetoric that would generally get you on the radar of the FBI, given the officials that he was threatening. In one comment, he notes, 50 million Americans with AR-15s will make quick work of any blockades the government can put to protect the White House. September of 19, most rioters don't bring assault rifles and body armor like we would, and we wouldn't be going to the streets. We'd be going to Washington. I mean, it's getting more and more violent. So again, you're thinking the FBI keeps tabs on some of these things, but maybe not. Crooks responds in another text saying, cops can't arrest me if they're all dead, adding, even an untrained man with an AR-15 is dangerous. You think the Newtown school shooter or any school shooter trained? Nope. And by the way, Tucker reports that last exchange is still on the internet available, but the FBI didn't see that. He argues, he asks, that's hard to believe that they didn't see it. He starts attacking Robert Mueller in July of 2019. He should be hanged with the rest of the Democrats. This is a witch hunt, and so on. Then, okay, there's a shot at Jews. And then as of January 23rd, 2020, he seems to change radically, reports Tucker, having seen the social media. He refers to, quote, Trump's stupidity. He began to mock the concept of the deep state. It's simply made up on anyone who disagrees with the right wing. Conversation over. He, in February 2020, called out Trump supporters as, quote, too brainwashed to realize how dumb they are. Same day, he called them racist. People are just racist, and Trump is one of them. In April of 2020, peak phase of the coronavirus lockdown, sometimes public safety comes before your personal rights. Crook became very critical of conservative media. Viruses don't spread through race, just like Tucker Carlson probably told you. 4 months later, August of 2020, writes, in my opinion, the only way to fight the government is with terrorism-style attacks. Sneak a bomb into an essential building, set it off before anyone sees you, track down any important people or politicians, military leaders, and try to assassinate them. Any sort of head-to-head fight is suicidal. Even ambush or surprise attacks likely aren't going to end well. That was prophetic. And then Tucker introduces this. At this point, after around August of 2020, someone who goes by Willie Tepus, T-E-P-E-S, online, introduces himself into the Crooks conversation. he started pressuring Crooks to commit violence. For example, quote, "If a gun and a badge is all that's needed, then authority obviously comes from that barrel of the gun. We have more guns than they do. There is no way we can avoid a war at this point, so you better just get used to it. We have nothing to lose and everything to win." In another post, "The alternative, a global police state, is unacceptable. Nothing in life is simple, but that is no argument against doing it." Here's a bit from the Tucker documentary on Willie Tepus.
At that point, a new character emerged into the conversation, a user named Willie Tepus, who started pressuring Crooks to commit violence. For example, quote, "If a gun and a badge is all that is needed, then authority obviously comes from the barrel of a gun. We have more guns than they do. There is no way we can avoid a war at this point, so you better just get used to the idea. We have nothing to lose and everything to win. And the alternative, a global police state, is unacceptable. Nothing in life is simple, but that is no argument against doing it." We do know, however, that Crooks' online footprint abruptly ends after his encounter with this mysterious figure, Willie Tepus. Regardless of whoever Willie Tepus is or was and what his motives may have been, who he may have been working for, there is no doubt that Crooks was ripe for recruitment by someone.
Okay, Glenn, after that long intro, forgive me for taking so long on it. What do you make of it? Because the FBI is now on defense, trying to defend the breadth of its investigation, trying to suggest they've done everything one would want them to do, and disputing that Thomas Crooks had much of an online footprint, though they're not specifically denying that these are his.
I think that's the main question, right? I mean, we spent many years very critical of the deep state, of the FBI, of the CIA, for their secrecy, for their refusal to inform the American people what we have a right to know, of their propagandistic deceit of everybody for political ends. And there was a promise that when, the Trump administration got elected and Dan Bongino and Kash Patel were in the FBI, everything was going to change. And now we're left about one of the most consequential news events that we have, which is this, attempted assassination on President Trump's life that almost succeeded. We're relying on Tucker Carlson and Miranda Devine and the New York Post to piece together little bits and pieces about what they've been able to determine. We don't know how much else there is in the FBI's possession that might affect the picture or change the picture. And yet we learned more about Thomas Crooks in the last week from Tucker and then from the New York Post than we have in the last 10 months since the Trump administration was inaugurated. Why is that? Why haven't they told us about Thomas Crooks? There's no trial. He's dead. They've denied that there's any conspiracy, that he worked with anybody, so there's no legal proceeding to impede. Why are they keeping all of that a secret? Why won't they even say if they have this or what else they have? I think that's what we ought to be demanding.
Totally agree. This is very odd that just now Tucker comes out with this information. Miranda Devine, I don't know. I have no idea, Glenn. My suspicion is that Tucker dropped this bomb on Thursday. The FBI was defending itself over the weekend since Thursday. And then Miranda Devine gets a big scoop on Monday. Do not have anything to back this up other than my suspicion that the FBI probably provided this data to Miranda. That's my guess, because she just has excellent sources inside the government. And to me, this almost seems like a head fake, almost like a look over here instead of at what Tucker did, because it's just too coincidental that, as you point out, we've had nothing on this guy, nothing. And now suddenly two big information dumps. He's being honest about exactly where he got it. Then comes this stuff about he's a furry. You tell me, why would the government not have shared that? Like, truly, why wouldn't the FBI have been sharing that, the furry thing, with us? Because this FBI did share that around the Nashville shooter, the young woman who was identifying as male, whereas Biden's FBI wouldn't. But this FBI did share those facts about that shooter. This FBI did share those facts about the Charlie shooter. So I'm a little confused as to what may be going on behind the scenes.
Right. And also in terms of the political trajectory that Tucker outlined, and that was great reporting because it took you along the way on this political path that this shooter seemed to have traversed by virtue of analyzing his online footprint, from going from somebody on the far right, ranting and raving against how Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib and the squad need to be murdered and immigrants need to be murdered, to something that resembles someone more on the left, very critical of Trump for his handling of COVID by not taking seriously enough, and other kinds of progressive rhetoric. I mean, it could be that at the end of the day, this is just a very confused person, could be a nihilist. But why don't we have this information in our possession? This is also something you would think Kash Patel and Dan Bongino and Pam Bondi and the Trump administration would want the public to know. In other words, you could accuse them of acting politically if the person were a conservative or on the right, just thought President Trump wasn't conservative enough. Maybe you could say, oh, well, they're on the right. They didn't want to have somebody on the right be blamed. But what about all the reporting that undercuts that and that suggests that he had a different ideology? What possible motive do they have for hiding that? And, I do think that we have to be careful about embracing conspiracy theories, but the reason people do so is because of behavior like this. Tucker's asking the question, did he go and get trained at the gun range by anybody? Who was this person online who seemed to be targeting him? How is it possible the FBI didn't know about him beforehand, given how explicit these violent threats were? And when you have the FBI hiding information and refusing to answer those basic questions, of course, conspiracy theories are going to emerge in that, because that's how trust and faith by the American public is lost in these institutions.
Mm-hmm. The clear implication, in my view, of Tucker's piece is that the guy was recruited by somebody to conduct this horrific act. And maybe it began with this character who goes by Willie Tepus. Maybe it was somebody else. Tucker goes on to report that the FBI has made no mention of this Tepus guy in public, though they certainly know he exists, he reports. He goes on to say, just days after the shooting, somebody screenshotted Tepus's YouTube page, despite the fact that he had very few followers. And they said, you can now find this guy's username being used on a foreign Antifa website. He also reports that Thomas Crooks' online footprint abruptly ends after his encounter with this mysterious figure, Willie Tepus. So he seems to me to be clearly implying that perhaps Willie Tepus recruited Crooks for someone, alerted someone that this is a hothead who's got, some mental problems and is prone to violence. And where did it go for there? One of the things Tucker pointed out in this documentary is they cremated his body. And it was done, I think, 10 days after he died, thus getting rid of any chance to do any follow-up testing on drugs in the system, etc. And he's suggesting that seems awfully quick on a guy you knew was attempting to assassinate the likely next president of the United States. I don't know, Glenn. This whole thing stinks. I mean, Susan Crabtree, who I really trust, she reports for Real Clear Politics, and she covers the Secret Service for them. She's a totally above board reporter. And she responded as follows. Crooks was on YouTube threatening to kill government officials, and he was called out for it by another user, which is true. She says, why didn't the FBI find these posts? Why hasn't this ever been released? Why don't we know who that user is who called him out? That person should at least be considered a hero, she says. And then she writes, the FBI was stonewalling Senator Ron Johnson and Senator Rand Paul's staff as of the 1-year anniversary of Butler. This is her story. Like, she's the one who broke all the big news on the Secret Service around Butler. And she says the FBI was stonewalling 2 Senate offices as of the 1-year anniversary of Butler. Both Senate offices stated. One of those offices said the Trump FBI was at first cooperating this spring and even had a briefing with Senate staffers on Crooks and on Butler, etc., but then abruptly stopped doing so, which earned a triple exclamation point from me in my notes, Glenn. Something's going on here. It's not that I don't trust Kash and Dan. It's that I think they have something that, for whatever reason, they feel strongly they cannot tell us.
Right. But that is sort of a metric of trust, whether the people in government do what people in government have long done, which is hide information from the American public and feed us a story that's untrue because they somehow think it's for the greater good that we be deceived or kept in the dark, when in a democracy we're actually supposed to know these things and be treated like adults, and we're not supposed to have information kept from us. Or they're protecting something that doesn't deserve protection. And let's just be very explicit about this. The last time there was a president who was murdered and Trump came extremely close, it's not like this was a fake assassination attempt or one right? It was like a millimeter away from blowing his head off. The last time that happened to a president who has his head blown off, was John F. Kennedy. And because of the secrecy around that, because of the lack of candor in our institutions, because of the bizarre way that the Warren Commission was constituted, where they had the head of the CIA and others who were the suspects, and the minds of a lot of people on that commission decreeing the truth, 70 years later, people still suspect that our government might have had some role in that. And when someone like President Trump, who was so hated by many factions inside the government, particularly the deep state, as he himself and his movement has long maintained, and I certainly have as well, comes very close to having their head blown off in a way that suggests at least malfeasance on the part of those who are supposed to be protecting him, if not worse, then people do start wondering, was there the involvement of government agencies or foreign or domestic ones? And that's a natural curiosity to have. The problem is that gets exacerbated when the FBI does what it's doing in this case, which is not just stonewalling us, but even the elected members of our Congress, ones from the Republican Party who can't be accused of acting politically or with a motive to get Trump. So to the extent their behavior is now under suspicion, they really have no one but themselves to blame. And we need an explanation. Like, why is this information being hidden? What are the answers to these questions?
My friend just lost her ring. She went to replace it. She realized it was a gold ring. The price of it has gone up like 25% since she bought the ring a year ago. That's because gold is on the march upward. And it is the one time of year that Birch Gold Group gives away free gold with every qualifying purchase. That's right, for Black Friday, when you convert an existing IRA or 401k into a tax-sheltered IRA in gold, Birch Gold will send free gold to your home for every $20,000 purchased. Gold started this year around $2,600 an ounce. By October, it was over $4,000 an ounce. Why? Global uncertainty. 2025 has been defined by trade wars, central banks are pulling from the US dollar as the global reserve currency, and military tension continues to build. Gold thrives in times of uncertainty, and if you are looking to diversify your savings, Birch Gold can help you. Plus, now through November 30th, get free gold, I say, with a qualifying purchase. Just text MK to the number 989898 to claim your eligibility and for a free info kit on gold. But your opportunity for free gold with purchase will end on November 30th, so don't wait. Text MK to the number 989898 for full details. Message and data rates may apply. Thanks so much for watching. If you like what you just saw, hit the subscribe button for more clips and full episodes.